I should probably start by saying that I wasn't looking for anything strange that night. I didn't believe in haunted houses or cursed cabins or anything that couldn't be explained away with reason. My wife, Emily, liked to tease me about that, said I always needed a neat explanation for everything. We'd been planning a short trip to the mountains for months, just a quick escape from the noise of the city. Work had been draining me dry, and Emily thought a weekend away in fresh air would do us both some good. We weren't after luxury, just privacy, somewhere off the beaten path. That's how we ended up with the cabin. I found it listed online, nothing fancy, no glossy photos, just a handful of grainy images that looked like they'd been scanned from an old brochure. Wooden siding, stone chimney, surrounded by trees so dense it looked like the forest pressed right up against the windows. The listing was bare bones. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, kitchen with wood stove, no Wi-Fi, no neighbors for miles. It sounded perfect. The drive up was uneventful at first. 2 hours of winding roads, the asphalt thinning into cracked gravel, the trees thickening overhead until the sun was barely breaking through. Our cell service dropped completely about halfway up the mountain, which Emily hated, but I secretly welcomed. It meant no calls, no emails, just us and the silence. When we finally pulled into the clearing, I remember being struck by how still everything felt. No sound of cars, no voices, not even the hum of power lines. Just the occasional whisper of wind in the trees and the creak of our tires crunching over dirt. The cabin looked older in person than in the photos. The wood was dark with age, the porch steps uneven. The front door bowed slightly like it had been forced open once and never quite closed right again. But it stood solid, and there was a strange charm in its weathered look. Emily smiled when she saw it. "Looks like something out of a postcard," she said, pulling her jacket tighter against the chill. Inside, it smelled faintly of dust and cold stone. The air carried the dampness of a place left shut too long. But it was cozy enough once we lit a fire in the stove. Wooden beams stretched low across the ceiling, and every wall was hung with framed photographs. That was the first thing Emily noticed. "Someone really liked their camera," she said, trailing her fingers along the frames. At first glance, they were harmless, sepia portraits of strangers. Families standing stiffly outside the cabin in old-fashioned clothes, hunters posing with rifles, blurred shots of snowy landscapes. A lot of them looked decades old. It didn't unsettle me then, though I did find it odd how many there were. Not just in the living room, but the hallway, the bedroom, even the kitchen. Every wall was crowded with faces of people we didn't know. "Creepy, but kind of charming," Emily said, smiling, though she didn't linger long on any one picture. I shrugged it off. Old cabins like this usually came with hand-me-down history. We unpacked, settled in, made coffee on the stove. The afternoon passed in quiet. I chopped wood, Emily read by the fire. By dusk, the forest outside had gone so dark it felt like the windows had been painted black. No distant glow of towns, no stars yet. Just a silence so deep it pressed against the glass. We ate a simple dinner and laughed about the creaks in the floorboards. Emily teased me about the way I kept glancing at the photos, and I admitted they were a little unnerving in the low firelight. "Don't worry," she said, brushing my hand. "They're just strangers. They can't hurt us." By the time we turned in for the night, I'd almost forgotten about them. But sometime past midnight, I woke up. I don't know what pulled me from sleep. There wasn't a noise, exactly. It was more like the absence of one, an emptiness that pressed down on my chest until I opened my eyes. The room was cold, colder than it should have been with the fire still burning low. Emily was asleep beside me, breathing steady. I lay there, listening. The house didn't groan or creak. Even the forest outside was unnaturally still. That was when I noticed the picture frame on the nightstand. I swear it wasn't there before. Earlier, the walls had been full of photographs, yes, but the nightstand had been bare except for a lamp. Now, sitting inches from my face was a small frame. Inside it, a photo of us, Emily and me, lying in that exact bed, in that exact cabin. I jolted upright, snatching the frame. My hands shook as I held it closer to the faint glow of the lamp. The picture wasn't old. It wasn't sepia or faded. It was sharp recent, like it had been taken with a modern camera. And the details, our clothes, the blanket, the angle of the lamp, were exactly as they were now. I felt the blood drain from my face. How could someone have taken this while we were asleep? I shook Emily awake, whispering her name, trying not to panic her. When she finally stirred, groggy and confused, I shoved the photo into her hands. She blinked at it for a long time, then at me, her eyes wide. This isn't funny," she said. "I'm not joking," I whispered harshly. "Look at it. That's us. Right now. In this bed." Her hands trembled. But how? Neither of us had an answer. We checked the windows, the locks, every corner of the room. Nothing. No sign anyone else had been inside. And yet, the photo existed. Eventually, after convincing ourselves it must have been left behind somehow, though that explanation made no sense, we crawled back under the covers, lying stiff and sleepless until dawn. But that was only the beginning. Morning light didn't bring relief. I remember lying awake, staring at the cabin's ceiling beams, waiting for the sun to finally push through the shutters. When it did, the gray light didn't make me feel safer, it only revealed more. Because the photographs had changed. At first, I thought it was just my imagination, that I'd spent the whole night wound too tight, seeing patterns where there weren't any. But as I walked through the cabin, one by one, the frames told a different story. They weren't just strangers anymore. They were us. Not in every picture, but in enough of them to make my skin crawl. A blurred couple at the kitchen table, us, with last night's mugs of coffee. A pair of figures in the living room, us, unpacking our bags. And on the far wall of the hallway, one that froze me in place. Emily leaning against the porch railing, exactly as she had yesterday evening, her hair pulled back, her jacket still zipped against the cold. Emily came up behind me, still pulling on a sweater, rubbing sleep from her eyes. I didn't even have to say anything. The moment her gaze landed on the hallway picture, she went pale. "That wasn't there yesterday," she whispered. "No," I said. My voice sounded strange to me, hollow in my throat. We checked every frame, our hands trembling as we lifted them off the nails, turning them over, searching for something, any sign of tampering, any tag, date, hidden camera. But they were just photographs. Real prints, textured, mounted behind glass. How? Emily's voice broke. These weren't here. They couldn't have been here. I didn't have an answer. The strangest part was the precision. Whoever had taken these photos had been standing exactly where we had been, capturing the moment from the angles only possible inside this cabin. Someone had been here, watching. The thought made my stomach turn. We should have left then, packed up, climbed into the car, and never looked back. But something kept us there, some mixture of disbelief and stubbornness. We told ourselves it had to be a trick, some weird coincidence. Maybe the photos had always been there and our minds were filling in details. Maybe we were tired. That was easier than admitting the truth. Someone had taken them while we weren't looking. We tried to push past it. The day stretched on in silence. Emily avoided the walls, staying by the fire with a book she wasn't really reading. I busied myself with chopping more wood, stepping outside just to breathe air that didn't feel heavy with eyes. The forest was dense, the trees pressing in close, their trunks damp and black with old rain. I remember staring into that thicket, searching for any sign of another person. But the woods gave nothing back. No birds, no rustle of animals, no distant echo of footsteps. just a silence so complete it hummed in my ears. By afternoon, we agreed to leave the next morning. We'd stick it out for one more night, half out of pride, half because the thought of driving back down those winding roads in the dark made Emily uneasy. Still, I caught her glancing at the photos more than once. Every time, her face tightened like she expected them to shift again before her eyes. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake listening to Emily's breathing, staring at the faint outline of the frame still sitting on the nightstand. I'd turned it face down, but that only made it worse. It was still there, waiting. Sometime past midnight, I heard it. Faint click. The sound of a camera shutter. I froze, every muscle locked. My eyes darted to Emily. She was still asleep. Another click. Softer, from the hallway this time. I slipped out of bed as quietly as I could, my heart thundering in my chest. The floorboards groaned under my weight, each step betraying me. I moved toward the door, every shadow a threat, every corner holding its breath. The hallway was dark, but I wasn't imagining it. The clicking was real, deliberate, spaced out like someone adjusting a camera. I whispered Emily's name, trying to wake her without raising my voice, but she didn't stir. Then the clicking stopped. I stood there, the silence pressing down like a hand over my mouth. Slowly, I turned my head toward the far end of the hallway, and in the faint glow from the stove's embers, I saw it. Another photograph. Not hung, not framed, just sitting neatly against the baseboard, as if it had been placed there moments before. I bent down, my hand shaking as I picked it up. The photo was glossy, fresh, the chemical smell still clinging to it. And in it, Emily and me, standing exactly as we were now. Me at the hallway entrance, half hidden in shadow. Her, asleep in bed behind me, faintly visible through the open door. My stomach dropped. The picture was impossibly current, taken seconds ago. I staggered back, nearly dropping it, my mind racing in a blur of fear and denial. That was when Emily gasped awake. She sat up fast, like she'd been shoved from a nightmare, her eyes wild and unfocused. What's wrong?" she stammered, her gaze darting from me to the photo in my hand. I couldn't answer. I could barely breathe. Because I knew now, without question, what had been happening. We weren't alone in that cabin. And whoever was with us wasn't hiding outside. They were inside the walls. I don't remember deciding to move. My body just acted, pulling Emily out of bed with a kind of frantic urgency I'd never felt before. "Get dressed," I told her, my voice raw. "We're leaving. Now." She didn't argue. She saw the photograph in my hand, saw my face, and knew I wasn't exaggerating. We pulled on boots and jackets in silence, the weight of the cabin pressing down around us. But when I reached for the front door, the handle refused to turn. It wasn't locked. It wasn't jammed. It was like the metal itself resisted me, stiff and unmoving under my grip. I pulled harder, bracing my foot against the step, wrenching with everything I had. Nothing. The windows were the same. Every latch groaned but held firm, as though the wood had swollen and sealed shut. Emily's breathing grew sharp, panicked. "We're trapped?" I didn't want to say it out loud. Instead, I forced myself to think. If someone had been taking pictures, they needed access. There had to be a way in and out. I grabbed the nearest frame off the wall and smashed it against the floor, the glass exploding in a sharp crack. Behind it, the wall was solid. No seams. No hidden panels. I pounded on the wood until my fists ached. Solid. But the sound it made, it wasn't right. Not the dense thud of thick timber, but something more hollow. A cavity. A space inside. Emily heard it too. Her eyes widened, her hand covering her mouth as if she already knew. "There. In there." I pressed my ear to the wall. For a moment, all I heard was the ringing in my own skull, the rasp of my breath. Then, A scrape. A faint dragging sound, just inches beyond the plaster. Slow, deliberate, like fingertips brushing wood. I stumbled back, bile rising in my throat. Emily whispered, "Oh my God." We didn't know what to do. Fight? Hide? Tear the walls down with our bare hands? Nothing seemed possible. The cabin was too old, too suffocating, every board and nail pressing us in closer. We barricaded ourselves in the bedroom. It wasn't much, just shoving the dresser against the door and clutching the fireplace poker like it could make a difference. The fire had long since gone out, and the room was bitter cold, our breath visible in the dark. We didn't talk much. Words felt fragile, like if we spoke too loud, we'd invite whatever was in the walls straight into the room. Time passed strangely. Minutes, hours, I couldn't keep track. The only constant was the sound. Every so often, the faint scrape returned. Then silence. Then another, from a different wall. Like something shifting position, crawling unseen through the hollow spaces. Once, I swore I heard breathing. A shallow, steady inhale and exhale, pressed so close it seemed to seep through the wood. Emily curled against me, shaking, her nails digging into my arm. And then, click. The sound of a camera shutter, so close it could have been inside the room. I whipped toward the nightstand, heart hammering. The frame I'd turned face down was upright again. Not just upright, changed. The photo inside now showed us as we were in that moment, huddled together on the bed, eyes wide, terror etched across our faces. Emily screamed, shoving it onto the floor. The glass cracked, but the image remained. Another click. I spun to the dresser we'd shoved against the door. A fresh photo slid beneath it, pushed from the hallway into the room. My hands shook as I picked it up. It was darker, grainier, like it had been taken without light. And in it, we weren't alone. Emily and I sat on the bed, yes, but just behind us, barely visible in the shadows, was a figure. Tall. Thin. Its face washed out to nothing, its body stretched wrong, like it didn't fit the frame. Emily saw it too. She shoved the photo away like it burned. We both knew then, this wasn't just someone hiding in the walls. Whatever was taking the pictures wasn't human. The hours dragged until the first hint of gray seeped through the shutters. Dawn. We'd survived the night. Or so we thought. I shoved the dresser aside and flung the bedroom door open, desperate to see sunlight, to feel anything beyond that suffocating dark. And my stomach dropped. Every wall of the cabin, every inch, was now covered in photographs. Hundreds of them. They layered over one another like scales, taped, nailed, jammed into the wood. And every single one was of us. Sleeping, eating, standing in the doorway, huddled in the bedroom. Some from moments I remembered, others from times I hadn't even noticed the click of a shutter. But what froze me were the newest ones. They weren't static. They were developing. I watched in horror as a blank sheet of glossy paper darkened, lines and shapes bleeding into view. And slowly, unmistakably, our faces appeared on it. Emily clutched my arm so hard I thought she'd draw blood. We both realized the same thing. The photos weren't just memories of what had happened. They were showing us now. And something else was in every frame, just behind us, drawing closer. I wish I could tell you we ran. That we found some hidden latch, forced open a window, sprinted into the forest, and didn't stop until we saw the road. But that isn't what happened. We just stood there, paralyzed, surrounded by our own faces staring back at us from every wall. The photos whispered a truth I couldn't deny anymore. This wasn't just about someone watching us. It was about being captured, trapped in a frame, reduced to a moment that would never end. Emily's voice broke the silence first. We're not supposed to leave, are we? Her words hit me like ice water. I wanted to argue, to promise her we'd get out. But even then, some part of me knew this cabin didn't let people go. The air grew heavier as we stood there, the smell of chemicals thickening, like a darkroom where film developed in real time. And then came the sound. Click. From behind us. We spun, and there it was, a fresh photograph, pinned to the doorframe as if it had been waiting. Emily screamed. It showed her. Not both of us this time. Just her, standing exactly where she stood in that moment. Her mouth open, mid-scream, eyes wide with terror. I grabbed her hand and pulled, desperate now, clawing at the door until my nails split. The wood didn't budge. The photos pressed closer, curling at the edges, their images wet, alive. And then another click. Another photo. This one of me, dragging her by the wrist, my face twisted in panic. Stop! I shouted into the walls, into the air, at whatever was holding us here. You don't get to do this. You don't. Click. The third photo showed us both, blurred now, as if we were already fading into the background. The figure was clearer, though, standing between us, its hand resting lightly on Emily's shoulder, pale fingers long and unnatural. Emily ripped the photo apart, screaming at it, tearing it into shreds. But as the pieces hit the floor, more copies slid out from the walls, exact duplicates, as if destroying one only multiplied them. I couldn't think. I couldn't breathe. Click. Another photo. This one I'll never forget. It wasn't of us alive. It was of us still. Lying side by side in the bed, our eyes closed, skin pale, as though the cabin itself had posed us like dolls. Emily dropped to her knees, sobbing. Something inside me broke then. I grabbed the fireplace poker and swung it at the nearest frame, smashing glass, ripping photos from the wall, shouting until my throat burned. But the photos just replaced themselves, sliding over the gaps like fresh skin over a wound. And beneath it all, I could feel the walls pulsing, breathing. Like the house itself was alive, and we were already inside its body. I don't remember falling asleep, or passing out, or losing consciousness. But when I opened my eyes again, daylight poured through the windows. The photos were gone. Every wall was bare, stripped clean, not a single frame in sight. The night before might have felt like a fever dream, if not for the shards of glass still scattered on the floor and the cuts burning in my palms. Emily sat at the edge of the bed, her face hollow, her eyes red. Neither of us said a word. We didn't pack. We didn't clean. We just left. And this time, the door opened easily. The car started on the first turn of the key. The road stretched out before us, and we drove without looking back. I thought maybe the nightmare was done. That maybe the cabin only wanted to scare us, to keep us as long as the night lasted. But when we finally reached the first gas station at the foot of the mountain, I went inside to pay. The clerk barely looked up as I slid a bill across the counter. But then his eyes flicked toward me, narrowed, and he froze. "Hey," he said slowly, his voice uncertain. You been up at that cabin?" My chest went cold. "What?" He reached under the counter and pulled something out. A frame. A photo inside it. He set it down between us, and I swear my knees almost gave out. It was us. Emily and me, standing exactly where we were in that moment, me at the counter, her visible through the glass door of the car outside, staring straight ahead. Fresh. Crisp. Like it had been taken seconds earlier. The clerk's voice was small, wary. "A guy left this here yesterday. Said you'd be coming. That was 3 months ago. Emily doesn't talk about it anymore. She barely talks at all. At night, I sometimes wake to find her staring at the bedroom walls like she expects them to start filling again. And me? I don't take pictures anymore. Not on my phone, not with a camera. Because sometimes, when I pass a window or a mirror, I swear I hear it. That faint, unmistakable click. And I know the story isn't finished." I've never really liked telling this story. Every time I go back to it, my chest tightens like I'm standing in that room again, smelling the rot in the wood and feeling the weight of something I can't explain pressing down on us. But I'll tell it the way it happened. No exaggerations. No embellishments. Just what we lived through that night. It was early October, the air cold enough to make you see your breath at night, and my friends had this stupid idea of spending a weekend in an old cabin outside of town. There were 5 of us. Me, Ryan, his girlfriend Emily, and our 2 friends Marcus and Danny. Ryan was the one who found the place, an abandoned cabin that his uncle supposedly owned but hadn't touched in years. We weren't supposed to be there, technically, but Ryan always loved the thrill of breaking rules. When he pulled the truck up that dirt path, the first thing I saw was the roofline, sagging like broken ribs under a damp sky. The cabin sat swallowed by trees, gray boards splitting, windows like eyes gone blind. It looked less like a house and more like something the forest was reclaiming. I remember thinking, no way we're staying in there. But of course, Ryan was already laughing, shouldering his pack, and telling us to grab the beer from the cooler. Inside, the cabin was worse. The boards groaned under our weight. Wallpaper peeled in strips, curling at the edges like old scabs. The air smelled of mildew and something faintly sweet, like fruit that had rotted long ago. Still, there was a fireplace, a table, and enough space for sleeping bags. Ryan called it cozy. I called it one spark away from burning down. The first couple of hours were harmless enough. We unpacked, lit a few candles, opened beers, and sat around the table joking about how the place looked like a set from a horror movie. Emily found an old deck of cards in a drawer, stiff and warped from moisture, and we played for a while. The sound of our laughter almost made me forget how much the cabin unsettled me. Almost! Because even then, there were small things. Little details that didn't sit right. Like the fact that no matter how many candles we lit, the corners of the cabin seemed to stay drowned in shadow, as if the light just refused to reach them. Or the way the wind outside made the wood breathe, like the house itself was exhaling. Around 10 p.m., Ryan suggested we do a head count. He said it as a joke, like we were a camp group. But he actually stood up and pointed at each of us, calling our names. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We laughed. It was dumb, but that was Ryan, always trying to turn everything into a bit. It wasn't until later, much later, that I'd remember that moment and wonder if he was already noticing something we hadn't. The night dragged on. We kept drinking, telling stories, daring each other to go outside alone into the woods. At one point, Danny swore she saw a face at the window, pale and pressed against the glass. But when we ran outside, the forest was empty. We laughed it off, told her she was seeing things. Still, she stayed quiet after that, her eyes flicking back to the window more than once. By midnight, the air inside the cabin felt heavy, stale, like it had been sealed for decades. We were all getting drowsy, the fire dying low. That's when Marcus, half drunk, slurred out, "Let's do another count." So Ryan did. He pointed at each of us again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then he frowned. 6. We all laughed, thinking he'd messed up. But then he did it again, slower this time, his finger moving from face to face. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He hesitated, then lowered his hand. 6. Who? Emily asked, her voice sharp. That's the thing, Ryan muttered, his grin gone. I swear. I counted 6. We all thought he was messing with us, trying to spook us. But when I looked at him, really looked, there was no humor in his face. His skin had gone pale, his jaw tense. Marcus clapped him on the shoulder, told him to quit screwing around. But I couldn't shake the way Ryan's eyes had darted, just for a second, toward the darkest corner of the cabin. The corner no candlelight could reach. That was only the beginning. At the time, we laughed it off and crawled into our sleeping bags. 5 bodies on the floor, shoulder to shoulder, like we were kids at a sleepover. The fire crackled low. Shadows bent across the walls. And somewhere between wakefulness and sleep, I heard it. A voice. Soft. Too soft to tell who it belonged to. But it whispered the numbers. Slowly. Carefully. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I didn't sleep. The others drifted off one by one, their breathing soft and uneven in the dark. But I lay there, staring up at the ceiling beams, counting them in my head just to distract myself. The whisper I'd heard, those numbers, kept circling in my mind like a nursery rhyme stuck on repeat. At some point I sat up trying not to wake anyone and looked around the cabin. The fire had burned down to nothing but embers, a dull orange glow breathing in and out as if the ash itself were alive. Shadows rippled across the walls. And for a moment, I swore I saw movement near the door. Not the flicker of light, not the play of fire, but a figure. A stillness darker than the dark around it. I blinked, and it was gone. I told myself it was exhaustion, the beer, the claustrophobic air in the cabin. But then the sound broke the silence, faint, steady, deliberate. Footsteps. Slow. From the far side of the room. Not outside. Inside. I froze, my ears straining. No one else stirred. I wanted to wake them, but my body refused to move. My breath stayed shallow, controlled, as if whatever was there might hear me if I let it out too hard. The steps stopped. Then, in the silence, a voice came again. A whisper. Right behind me. 6. I spun around, my heart hammering, but there was no one there. Only Marcus, mumbling in his sleep, his arm flung out over his bag. I lay back down, pulling the blanket tight against me, forcing my eyes shut. But sleep never came. Not really. I drifted in and out, half dreaming, half listening to the house groan around us, until finally the first dull gray light of morning bled through the broken window panes. By daylight, the cabin didn't look less ruined, but it felt safer somehow. Sunlight stretched across the warped floorboards, showing dust and cobwebs where shadows had lurked just hours before. No one spoke much during breakfast. Ryan boiled water in a dented pot. Emily chewed a granola bar without looking at anyone, and Marcus cracked jokes that didn't quite land. Danny just kept glancing at the window, her face pale. Finally, Ryan said it. What happened last night? The room went still. You mean your stupid counting game? Marcus laughed, though it sounded forced. I wasn't messing around, Ryan said flatly. I counted 6. Twice. And I wasn't the only one who. He trailed off, his eyes flicking to me. I swallowed hard. I wanted to say nothing. I wanted to let it pass. But the weight of it pressed on me. I heard something, I admitted. My voice was low. A voice. Counting like you did. Except it didn't stop at 5. Emily's head snapped toward me. You heard it too? Her words hung there. Heavy. What the hell are you guys saying? Marcus asked, grinning too wide, like if he didn't smile the silence would crush him. Somebody's screwing with us. That's all. Probably Danny trying to freak us out. Danny looked up sharply, her eyes glassy. I didn't say anything, she whispered. But I did see something at the window. We all stared at her. A face, she said. Her voice cracked. Pale. Watching us. Ryan muttered a curse and rubbed his jaw. No one ate after that. We killed the day with small distractions, walking the edge of the property, tossing rocks at tree trunks, playing cards again at the table. But no matter what we did, attention hung in the air, like invisible wires stretched tight between us. It was Danny who noticed it first. We were sitting at the table, and she suddenly stopped mid-sentence, staring at the empty chair across from her. What? Marcus asked. Her lips parted. Who was sitting there a second ago? We all turned. The chair was empty. No one, Emily said. It was empty. Danny's eyes filled with tears. No, I swear. Someone was just sitting there. She pushed back from the table so fast her chair toppled. We tried to calm her down, but inside, I felt it too, the uneasy certainty that the chair had not been empty. That someone had been there, silent, part of us. When night fell again, the dread returned with it. We lit more candles, dragged our sleeping bags closer together. No one was joking anymore. Even Marcus had gone quiet, his forced bravado worn thin. Let's just get through the night, Ryan said, his voice tight. Tomorrow we pack up and go. Deal? No one disagreed. But the house wasn't going to let us off easy. Hours passed. I don't know how many. The forest outside was silent, not even the sound of crickets. The silence was so deep it pressed against my ears. And then, like the night before, Ryan sat up suddenly. Count, he whispered. What? Emily asked, her voice trembling. Count us, he said. Now. One by one, she pointed. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Her hand froze. Her lips parted. Her face drained of color. 6. I felt the blood leave my own body, my limbs cold and heavy. We all sat up, eyes darting around, counting and recounting, pointing, whispering, denying. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, always ending on 6. But there were only 5 faces we recognized. And then, in the flickering candlelight, Ryan said something that turned my stomach to stone. Don't you see? He whispered. His finger trembled as he pointed at the far side of the circle. There's someone between us. The cabin turned into a coffin that night. We sat huddled in our circle, candles trembling in the drafts sneaking through the rotten boards, and no one wanted to be the first to lie back down. It wasn't just a joke anymore. It wasn't nerves, or too much beer, or shadows. The 6 of us, 5 of us, knew something was wrong. But no one said it out loud. Not yet. Ryan was the first to break the silence. Everyone hold hands, he whispered. Emily gave him a sharp look, but he didn't back down. Slowly, reluctantly, we linked hands, 5 people sitting in a circle, fingers clammy, the fire breathing weakly behind us. Now count again, Ryan said. I started, my voice hoarse. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. When I reached the end, I froze. I didn't want to keep going. I didn't want to hear it come out of my mouth. But before I could stop, before I could even close my lips, a voice, not mine, spoke the next word. 6. Every candle in the room went out at once. Emily screamed. Marcus cursed, scrambling to his feet. The cabin plunged into blackness so thick it felt physical, like a cloth dropped over our heads. In that suffocating dark, I felt something brush against my shoulder. Not a hand. Not clothing. Skin. Cold, damp skin. I shoved back, gasping, clawing for my lighter. But when I sparked it, the tiny flame showed only our 5 faces, pale and wide-eyed. Nothing else. But I swear, the circle was too tight. There wasn't enough room between us. We didn't sleep at all. Every sound, the groan of wood, the creak of rafters, the distant rustle of trees, snapped our nerves taut. We kept the fire alive, feeding it with broken chair legs and scraps of paneling, too scared of the dark to let it die. Danny kept whispering that she wanted to leave, her words tumbling fast, on the edge of panic. But Ryan wouldn't let us. You want to hike back through those woods at night? He snapped. You think that's safer? None of us argued. We were trapped by our own fear. Sometime near dawn, I must have dozed off despite everything, because I woke with a start to silence so absolute it pressed against my eardrums. No breathing, no crackle of fire, just stillness. When I sat up, I realized why. Everyone else was already awake, and they were all staring at me. "What?" I whispered. "Say it," Emily muttered. Her voice shook. "Say how many there are." My stomach turned. "What? Count," Marcus hissed. I swallowed, my mouth dry. I didn't want to. God, I didn't want to. But their eyes locked on me, 5 sets, begging and demanding at once. I raised my finger. My voice trembled. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. My finger lowered. Relief flickered across my chest, until Ryan leaned forward, his eyes black hollows in the dim light. "You didn't point at me." I froze. "What? You skipped me," he whispered, his face twisted, pale and desperate. "You counted everyone else, but you didn't point at me." I stammered something, but my voice failed. A cold sweat slid down my back. Danny pushed herself up. "Stop. Stop it. This isn't funny anymore." But Ryan's gaze wouldn't leave mine. "Tell me I'm real," he said. His voice cracked. "Tell me I'm here." And the worst part, the part that's haunted me ever since, was that for one sickening second, I couldn't. Because in the flicker of firelight, his features didn't look steady. They looked blurred, shifting, like a face remembered from a dream instead of one sitting right in front of me. That day felt longer than any day of my life. We tried to distract ourselves, but conversation always circled back to the same dread. Marcus snapped at Danny for crying. Emily snapped at Marcus for not taking things seriously. Every word made the air tighter, heavier, as if the house itself was feeding on us. At one point, Danny insisted she heard someone moving in the loft above us. The problem was, the cabin didn't have a loft. Still, Ryan climbed a ladder up to the crawlspace, his flashlight being cut through dust and cobwebs. Nothing there. He came back down pale, wiping his hands on his jeans. None of us believed him. That night, the 3rd, we didn't even pretend we were okay. We pulled our bags into a corner, sat shoulder to shoulder, and promised we'd leave at first light no matter what. But promises don't mean much when you're inside something that doesn't want you to leave. Around midnight, Marcus jolted upright. "Do you hear that?" We all froze. At first I thought it was wind, but then I heard it too. A whisper. Faint. From just outside the wall. Counting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The voice dragged out the last syllable, stretching it like a blade scraping stone. 6. Danny covered her mouth with her hands. Emily started to cry. And then came the knock. A soft, deliberate knock against the cabin wall, right behind our heads. Knock! 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 I felt the vibration through the boards. Steady. Patient. Not asking to be let in, announcing that it already was. Marcus grabbed the hatchet we'd used to split kindling. His hand shook so hard the blade clattered against the floor. "Whatever this is, whatever the hell you are, leave us alone," he shouted into the dark. His voice cracked halfway through. The knocking stopped. For a long, brittle moment, the silence was worse than the sound. Then, without warning, the window across the room exploded inward. Glass rained across the floor, shards catching candlelight. Cold air rushed in. But no branch had hit it, no stone. Nothing outside at all. Only the faint outline of a figure, standing just beyond the broken frame. And in the flickering firelight, we all saw it at the same time. It wasn't a stranger. It was someone we knew. It was one of us. We froze. Every one of us stared at that broken window, glass scattered like ice across the floorboards. The figure stood just beyond the jagged frame, faint in the dark, backlit by the pale shimmer of moonlight through the trees. At first my brain refused to process it. My eyes told me what I was seeing, but the thought didn't fit anywhere in reality. Because the face in the window, the body, the stance, even the tilt of the head. It was Marcus. And Marcus was sitting right next to me, clutching the hatchet in his trembling hands. Emily let out a broken sob. Danny scrambled backwards, tripping over her sleeping bag. "Jesus Christ," Marcus whispered. He stared at the window, at his own reflection come to life. "That's not me. That's not me." The figure outside didn't move, didn't blink. It just stood there, lips parting slowly. And in a voice that was Marcus's, but thinner, like air forced through a cracked flute, it whispered, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Ryan lunged forward, shoving the table between us and the window as if a few planks of rotted wood could protect us. But when the figure vanished, slipping back into the trees without a sound, none of us felt relief. The air itself seemed to sink heavier, as though whatever it was had simply stepped closer, inside. We didn't bother pretending anymore. The cabin wasn't safe, and the woods weren't safe, and morning couldn't come fast enough. The rest of the night blurred into fragments burned into my memory. Emily whispering the Lord's Prayer under her breath until her voice cracked. Danny scratching at her own arms, muttering that she could feel it touching her. Ryan pacing, mumbling about how maybe one of us wasn't really us at all. And Marcus. Marcus sat against the wall, hatchet limp in his hands, staring at the floor. Silent. At one point, when I glanced at him, I swear I saw his lips moving, though no sound came out. Counting. Over and over. When the first pale streaks of dawn bled through the broken window, I thought we'd survived. We packed in silence. No jokes, no arguments. Just shaking hands, stuffing gear into bags. The air inside the cabin was sharp with cold, but sharper still with the knowledge that if we didn't leave now, we might never. Ryan went to the door first. His hand hovered on the knob. He turned back, his face bloodless. "Before we go," he said, one last time. None of us wanted to. God, none of us wanted to. But fear makes you obey. We lined up at the door. 5 of us. Bags on our backs. Ryan pointed, one by one. His voice cracked with every number. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. His finger lowered. Relief flickered across his face. Then Danny spoke. Her voice was quiet, distant, like she wasn't talking to us at all. "You skipped one." We froze. Ryan's head snapped toward her. "What?" Danny's eyes glistened with tears. Her hand shook as she pointed, not at the group, but to the corner of the cabin, the darkest one, where the morning light didn't reach. "He's still here," she whispered. And before anyone could stop her, she dropped her bag and walked toward it. "No!" Emily screamed, grabbing for her, but Danny slipped free, her steps slow, as if drawn by some gravity stronger than her own will. The rest of us backed toward the door, every instinct screaming to get out. But my eyes were fixed on Danny, on the way her body stiffened as she reached the shadow. Her lips moved once, soundless. Then her mouth opened wider, stretching in a way that didn't look human. And in a voice that wasn't hers at all, she said, 6. The candles we hadn't blown out flared high and then snuffed in the same breath. The room plunged black. Chaos erupted, Emily pulling at me, Ryan kicking the door open, Marcus shoving us forward. I don't remember running, only the trees whipping past, branches clawing at my face, the pounding of my heartbeat drowning out everything. But I remember the voice. It followed us through the trees. Not close, not far, just everywhere. Counting, always counting. We made it back to the truck. By some miracle, the keys were still in Ryan's jacket. He drove like the devil himself was behind us, the road a blur. When we finally hit town, we didn't speak. We didn't even look at each other. We just went our separate ways, like survivors of a shipwreck too ashamed to admit what they'd seen. That was years ago. I don't talk to any of them now. Ryan and Emily broke up. Marcus left the state. Danny, well, none of us have heard from her since. She didn't come home after that night. Her family filed a missing persons report, but nothing ever came of it. Sometimes I wonder if she's still out there, in those woods. Sometimes I wonder if we ever really made it back at all. And sometimes, late at night, when I'm lying awake in the dark, I swear I hear it again. A whisper. Right beside my bed. Counting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then, after a pause long enough for me to hold my breath, 6. I should probably start by saying I don't believe in ghosts. At least, I didn't, not until that night. My girlfriend, Emily, and I had been together for about 3 years. We weren't the kind of couple who sought out haunted adventures or chased after urban legends. In fact, I've always hated those corny ghost hunting shows. But we both love traveling off the beaten path, and that's what led us to the cabin. It was late autumn, the air cold enough to sting your skin, when Emily found the listing online. It was described as a rustic countryside retreat, tucked away in the hills about 2 hours outside the city. The photos were grainy, taken with what looked like an old flip phone, but the cabin itself seemed charming enough. Wooden beams, a stone fireplace, a porch facing the forest. Cheap, private, and different. That's all we cared about. We drove up on a Friday afternoon, our car rattling over gravel roads that wound through stretches of farmland and dark, empty woods. By the time we arrived, the sky was the color of bruises, swollen with heavy clouds. The cabin looked smaller than I expected. It sat back from the dirt road, half hidden by crooked trees whose branches hung low like arms trying to pull it into the earth. The paint had faded into a dull gray, and the windows looked more like black eyes than anything welcoming. Emily laughed nervously when we pulled up. "Cozy," she said, though her voice sounded tight. Inside, the place smelled faintly of damp wood and dust. The floorboards creaked under our steps. A thin rug covered the living room, and mismatched furniture crowded the space around the fireplace. Everything looked stuck in time. No TV, no modern appliances, just the basics. It wasn't filthy, but it wasn't inviting either. The kind of place you'd never quite feel comfortable in, no matter how long you stayed. Still, we settled in. Emily made tea on the small stove while I unpacked a few things. We'd planned to take some photos for fun, nothing professional, just little snapshots of the weekend. That detail matters, because those pictures are the only reason we noticed him. The first few hours passed uneventfully. We walked the perimeter of the cabin, exploring the overgrown garden in the back and a small shed that was locked with rusted chains. The trees stretched so thick around us it felt like the forest swallowed sound. Even our own voices seemed to fall flat. By nightfall, a storm rolled in. Wind rattled the cabin's windows, and the trees thrashed against each other. Rain started around 9, tapping on the roof in uneven bursts. We stayed inside, playing cards, laughing, trying to make the place feel less eerie. Emily took a picture of me holding up a ridiculous hand of cards, and we both laughed at how stupid I looked. That was the first photo. We didn't notice anything strange at the time. It was only later, scrolling through them in bed, that Emily went quiet. "Wait, do you see that?" she whispered, shoving her phone toward me. At first, I thought she was joking. But then I looked closer. Behind me, in the dark reflection of the window, stood a man. He wasn't clear, not at first glance, just a pale outline, blurred like the camera had caught him mid-step. His face was turned toward me though, and I swear I could see the hollow sockets where eyes should have been. I felt my stomach drop. My throat dried out so quickly I couldn't even swallow. Emily laughed nervously, the sound too sharp. "It's probably just a trick of the light, or like your reflection doubled or something." But it wasn't. My reflection was already there, facing the camera. This. thing was behind me. Too tall, too solid, too wrong. We told ourselves it didn't matter, that it was just the storm, the shadows, the crappy resolution of a phone camera. We wanted to believe that. But then Emily took another picture. This time it was of both of us, sitting on the couch in front of the fire. The flames blurred in the shot, casting orange light over our faces. We looked happy. Normal. Except he was there again. Closer this time. Standing in the corner of the room, near the door to the hallway. Still as stone. We locked the doors after that. It sounds stupid, locking doors in the middle of nowhere, when whatever we were seeing didn't even feel human. But it gave us something to do. Something to control. I told Emily we should just stop taking pictures, that it was only making us paranoid. She nodded, though I could see her hands shaking. We tried to sleep. But every creak of the cabin seemed amplified, every groan of the wood like a footstep in the hall. At some point after midnight, I got up to use the bathroom. I didn't turn on the light, I just followed the dim glow from the living room fire. The hallway felt wrong, narrower than it should have been, like the walls were leaning in. That's when I saw him. Not in a picture, not in a reflection, in the hallway. A figure, motionless, barely visible in the dark. Too tall for a man. Shoulders hunched, head bent slightly forward like he was listening. I froze. My body refused to move, even though my brain screamed to run. And then, he was gone. Just like that. The hallway was empty. I stumbled back to bed, shaking so badly that Emily sat up immediately. I didn't tell her what I saw. I couldn't. Saying it out loud would make it too real. Instead, I just whispered, "We're leaving first thing in the morning." She didn't argue. But we didn't make it to morning. I didn't sleep after that. I just lay there in the dark, every muscle in my body tense, waiting for the cabin to breathe again. Because that's what it felt like. The place was alive. Emily drifted off for maybe half an hour at a time, jerking awake whenever the wind slammed against the siding or the fire popped too loud. Around 2 in the morning, she reached for her phone. I thought she was just checking the time. But then I saw the screen glow on her face, pale blue. She was scrolling through the photos again. "Stop," I whispered, sharper than I meant to. "I just want to make sure we didn't." "Imagine it," she murmured. Her voice was thin, like she was speaking through glass. She tilted the screen toward me. The man was in every single one. Not just the first 2. Not just the ones we'd noticed earlier. All of them. In the garden shot from before dinner, there he was, leaning against the shed, blurred in the tree line. In the photo of Emily holding her teacup, he was half seen through the kitchen window, as if he'd been standing right outside. Even in the silly picture of my hand of cards, he was reflected faintly in the dark glass of the clock on the mantel, his head turned toward us. Every photo. Always closer. Always watching. I shoved the phone away. "Delete them." Emily hesitated, her thumb hovering over the screen. What if we need proof? What if no one believes us? The thought of carrying that thing's face around in her pocket made me feel sick. "Delete them," I repeated. She didn't. She just locked the phone and shoved it under the blanket like that would somehow erase it. The storm outside raged on. Around 3, the power flickered. The lights we hadn't turned off in the kitchen and hallway sputtered, dimmed, and died, leaving us with only the orange glow of the dying fire. That was when the knocking started. At first, I thought it was just branches hitting the siding. But it was too deliberate, too steady. 3 knocks. Silence. 3 more. Not on the door, on the wall. Somewhere near the back of the cabin. Emily clutched my arm. Her nails dug into my skin through the blanket. We listened, hearts hammering, waiting for it again. This time it came from the opposite wall. Knock, 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 like he was circling us, testing every surface of the cabin, one by one. I couldn't take it anymore. I got up, grabbed the flashlight from my bag, and clicked it on. The beam cut through the dark like a blade, but it only made the shadows seem thicker, heavier. "Don't," Emily hissed. "Please, just stay here." But I had to. Doing nothing was worse. I moved through the cabin, shining the light on every wall, every window. Rain streaked the glass, branches scraped across the roof, but there was nothing, no one outside. When I came back, Emily was sitting rigid in bed, her eyes wide, her phone clutched in both hands. "What?" I asked. She didn't answer. She just turned the screen toward me. It was open on the camera. And there, in the live feed, standing right behind me in the doorway, him. I spun around so fast, I nearly dropped the flashlight. Nothing. Just the empty doorway. The hallway yawning black beyond it. Emily was shaking, whispering over and over. "He was there. He was there. He was right behind you." My chest felt like it was caving in. I slammed the door shut, locked it, dragged the dresser across the floor to block it. The sound was deafening in the small cabin, wood scraping wood, but I didn't care. We curled up together on the bed, both of us shaking, the flashlight clutched between us. I don't know how much time passed after that. Minutes, maybe hours. The storm blurred everything. But at some point, I realized something terrifying. The knocks had stopped. The wind had died. Even the rain seemed muted, like the world outside the cabin had gone silent. Too silent. And then, faint but clear, I heard the click of Emily's phone camera. She hadn't touched it. I watched her face in the dim light. She was staring at me, horrified. Another click. The phone, lying on the blanket between us, was taking pictures all on its own. One after another. Click! 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 Emily snatched it up, her hand trembling. She turned it over, like maybe the buttons were jammed. But when the next photo appeared on the screen, she dropped the phone like it had burned her. I picked it up. The image made my blood run cold. It was us. Taken from inside the room, as if someone else had been holding the camera. We were curled together on the bed, the flashlight between us. And behind us, between the dresser and the wall, stood the man. Closer than ever. His face clearer now. Skin the color of damp ash, features blurred as if they were smudged across his skull. His mouth was just a hollow line, his eyes empty pits. I couldn't breathe, I couldn't move. Emily grabbed my hand. "We need to leave," she whispered. And she was right. But as I turned toward the door, I realized the mistake I'd made earlier. The dresser I had pushed in front of it. It had been shoved back, far enough to let someone slip inside. We didn't think. We didn't plan. We just ran. Emily grabbed her coat, half inside out, and bolted for the front door. I snatched the keys from the table, fumbling in the dark, my hands slick with sweat. The rain had picked back up, hammering the roof as if it had been waiting for us to move. Wind howled against the cabin walls. I yanked the front door open, and the storm rushed inside. Cold, violent, furious. The flashlight beam wavered over the porch, the trees beyond swaying like bodies. For a split second, the night seemed empty. Then the beam caught something. A figure at the tree line. Tall. Still. Watching. Emily screamed. I shoved her toward the car. "Go! Go!" We stumbled through the mud, the rain blinding us, branches clawing at our clothes. I unlocked the car with shaking hands, practically threw her into the passenger seat, and slid in behind the wheel. The engine coughed when I turned the key. Once. Twice. On the third try, it caught. Headlights cut across the cabin, the trees, the porch. And for the first time, I saw him clearly. Not in a photo. Not in the corner of my eye. There, standing on the porch in the rain, as if he had been waiting for us to leave. I slammed the car into reverse, tires spitting mud. The figure didn't move, didn't flinch. He just stood there, rain pouring down his ash-gray face, his hollow eyes fixed on us. The gravel road was slick, winding, nearly invisible in the storm. Branches whipped against the windshield as I gunned the car forward. Emily sobbed beside me, her hands covering her face. I didn't dare look back, but the rearview mirror betrayed me. There he was, not standing on the porch anymore. Closer, in the middle of the road behind us, walking steadily through the storm. I drove faster, the tires skidding, gravel spraying. "He's not real," I muttered, over and over, like the words could make it true. "He's not real, he's not." Emily's phone buzzed. A notification. She picked it up with trembling fingers. Her face went white. It was the camera app. Another photo, taken just seconds before, of us, inside the car. And in the back seat, between us, sat the man. I swerved so hard the car nearly went into a ditch. Emily screamed, clutching the dashboard. I whipped my head around, flashlight clattering to the floorboard. The back seat was empty. Just coats, bags, and shadows. But the photo was still there on her screen. His face inches from ours, blurred but undeniable. I couldn't breathe. My hand slipped on the wheel, my pulse a drumbeat in my ears. "We can't out on this," Emily choked out. "We can't." I wanted to tell her she was wrong, that we just had to make it to the highway, find another car, another person, anything. But deep down, I knew she was right. The storm pressed in heavier, the trees crowding the road like a tunnel. Headlights struggled to cut through the darkness. It felt like the road was folding in on itself, pulling us back toward the cabin, no matter how far I drove. I checked the rear view again. Nothing. Just rain and black woods. For a moment, I let myself believe we'd left him behind. That's when the radio crackled to life. We hadn't even turned it on. Static filled the car, sharp and hissing, before a low, broken voice bled through. It said my name. Once. Then again. Drawn out, distorted, like it had been dragged across miles of static just to reach me. Emily clamped her hands over her ears, screaming for me to turn it off. I slammed my fist against the power dial, but the static didn't stop. The voice only grew louder, until it wasn't coming from the radio anymore. It was coming from the back seat. I didn't look. I couldn't. The air grew heavy, thick, like the whole car was filling with water. My chest burned with each breath. Emily sobbed, clutching my arm so hard her nails dug bloody crescents into my skin. Something cold brushed the back of my neck. A fingertip. Slow. Deliberate. I lost control. The car fishtailed on the wet road, spun once, twice, before slamming into the ditch with bone-rattling force. The airbags exploded, filling the cabin with dust and the taste of chemicals. For a moment, everything went silent. Rain hammered the roof. Emily gasped beside me, blood running from a cut above her eye. And in that silence, I heard the unmistakable sound of a camera shutter. Click! Somewhere inside the car. We scrambled out, dragging ourselves into the mud, coughing, bleeding, soaked. The car sat lopsided in the ditch, one headlight shattered. The storm howled, the trees groaning and bending. And through it, across the road, I saw him again. Closer than ever. Standing perfectly still, no matter how hard the wind tore at him. Like the storm wasn't even touching him. Emily clutched my arm. "We can't go forward. We can't go back. What do we do?" Her voice cracked on the last word, and I realized there was no answer. Not one that made sense. Not one that ended well. But standing in the mud, shivering, bleeding, Staring at that thing in the storm, I understood something I hadn't before. He wasn't trying to chase us. He was waiting for us to go back. And the sickest part? I knew that was exactly what we were going to do. We didn't argue. We didn't decide. We just turned around. The storm pressed against us from every side, the wind screaming through the trees as if it knew we were going the wrong way. But some part of me, buried deep in the gut, deeper than reason, knew there was no other choice. We stumbled back up the gravel road, soaked to the bone, headlights from the wrecked car fading behind us. Every step felt like walking into a mouth that had already swallowed us once. Emily held her phone out in front of us like a lantern. The battery was low, but the faint glow was the only light we had. Each time the screen dimmed, she shook it, terrified of losing it. When the cabin came into view through the storm, my heart stopped. The porch light was on. We had never turned it on. The door was wide open, banging against the wall in the wind. Inside, the fire burned again, fresh logs stacked high, flames roaring like it had never gone out. I felt Emily squeeze my hand so tight I thought my bones would crack. Her face was pale, blood streaked across her temple, her lips trembling. "We can't go back in," she whispered. But we did. The storm vanished the moment we crossed the threshold. Not lessened, not softened. Gone. Silence pressed down around us, thick and suffocating. The only sound was the pop and hiss of the fire, steady and calm, like nothing had ever happened. The cabin was warm. Too warm. The air heavy with the smell of burning wood, damp earth, and something else, something sour. And on the table, laid out in a perfect row, were photographs. Our photographs. All the ones we'd taken that night. Printed, developed, already curled slightly at the edges. I picked one up with shaking hands. My own face stared back at me. Emily's too. And behind us, always behind us, he stood, blurred and still. The longer I stared, the clearer he became. As if the photograph was finishing itself, filling in the details my eyes hadn't wanted to see. His face sharpening. His mouth stretching wider. His eyes sinking deeper. I dropped the photo, bile rising in my throat. Emily's phone buzzed in her hand. She screamed and nearly threw it. But the screen had already lit up. A new picture, taken just seconds ago, of us, standing in the cabin doorway, holding hands, looking at the fire. And behind us, in the photograph, he wasn't blurred anymore. He was grinning. Emily snapped. She tore the phone apart with her bare hands, ripping the case off, throwing the pieces into the fire. Sparks burst up the chimney. For a second, I thought maybe it would stop. Maybe destroying the thing that kept capturing him would break whatever this was. But then, the camera sound again. Not from the phone. From everywhere. Click, click, click. Over and over, the cabin filling with the mechanical snap of a shutter, like invisible hands were documenting every move we made. And in the flicker of the firelight, I realized the walls were covered. Not wood. Not paneling. Photographs. Hundreds. Thousands. Layered on top of each other, curling with age. Faces I didn't recognize. Families. Couples. Children. All of them smiling, laughing, living. And in every single one, he was there. Behind them. Watching. Emily collapsed, sobbing into her hands. I grabbed her, pulled her close, but my own body was shaking too hard to comfort her. I wanted to scream, to run, to burn the cabin to the ground. But then I saw it. One final photograph, pinned above the fireplace. New, glossy, perfect. It was us. Just moments before. Standing in front of the cabin, soaked in rain, holding hands in the dark. And behind us, closer than ever, his gray hands resting on our shoulders. I don't remember what happened after that. Not clearly. Flashes, pieces. Emily screaming. The fire roaring higher than it should have. My own hands tearing at the walls, trying to rip the photographs down only to find more beneath them. The storm swallowing the cabin whole. Then, nothing. I woke up in daylight. The cabin was silent. Empty. Emily was gone. So were the photographs. The walls bare, the table clear, the fire long dead. No sign anyone had ever been there. Except for my phone, sitting neatly on the floor beside me. The battery was dead, but when I plugged it in hours later, safe at home, I found them. Hundreds of pictures. Of me, sleeping. Every angle, every hour. And in every single one, he's standing over me,